Hello. Can you hear me good? Okay. Welcome to the African American Museum and Library. I am Vita Silva, the museum project coordinator, and I see a few friendly faces that I've seen quite often, but I see some other friendly faces that I haven't seen before. So welcome to all of you to the African American Museum and Library. We have a wonderful program set up for you. And I am just like so excited. But before we get into the program, I am required to let you know what this institution is all about and the resources. So I guess I need to do my job. So we are a research institution for African American history and culture. We opened up in 2002 of February. I've been here since 2002 of October. So I celebrated 21 years. And thank you. And yes, some challenges, but all in all, it was all worth it. So I'm still here and still trying to do my thing and keep the African American Museum and Library still moving forward up. We have 4 departments here. The first department I'll speak of is the reference library. The reference library has over 16,000 titles in our wonderful department. However, it does not include the rare book collection. The rare book collection, the oldest book, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the oldest book, because we'll be here for a while, the oldest book actually is 1815. Now, it is not a book of an African American. He is not an African American, the Navy captain. So you're talking about a journal, 1815, of a Navy captain that no, he's not African American, but he talks about an African American who is the cook for the ship. So when you come in here, you won't see the rare book collection. However, if you ask, perhaps we'll issue some white gloves and let you go through some of our rare book collection. Now let's move over to the archives department. The archives department has approximately over 200 collections, such as the first African-American school teacher in the Oakland Unified School District, the only one and only Miss Ida Jackson. And you'll see, I see some faces say, yes, Ida Jackson. You'll see Miss Ida Jackson and a huge banner right across on the west wing. She's in a chair with her AKA sisters behind her. So you are going to see some wonderful images up here, and I'll get to that in a minute. So you have the legendary Motown designer who now is in Oakland, but he came here when he was 7 years old. Went on to Hollywood and became famous for working with Miss Dinah Ross and the Supremes, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, and what about Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and the Temptations? And see if you know this person. I see some hands say, yay. What about Michael Jackson? Do you know Michael Jackson? Okay, Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. So, because of those designs, we preserve African American history and culture, as I mentioned. Each of those designs that are in our collection, we put them, actually, they store them in an acid-free garment bag, which runs us about $300 or $400 per bag. So not only do we honor the wonderful legends of Oakland and the Bay Area, we make sure that we preserve their history. That's what we do. And I'll talk about Maury Turner. Does anybody know Maury Turner? Heard of Maury? Yes, the legendary cartoonist of the Wee Pals. So that's just some of the collections. Now, archives department is by appointment only. Now, let's move on to my latest department, the seed lending library, AMLO seed lending library. All the seeds when you walk in are non-GMO and organic. You come in, get those seeds, take them home, grow them in small containers or large containers, and if you let them go to seed, we're thinking that you might bring us some seed back. And that's why we call it the AMLO Seed Lending Library. All free to the public, engaging with the community. That's what we do. Now, the last department I'll talk about is where you're sitting here. This is our beautiful museum gallery. What you see to my left, to my right, East Wing, West Wing, is Visions Toward Tomorrow. The history of Oakland, beginning with the 1800s. You have audio, visual, kiosks, and a lot to see up here. We do sometimes have traveling exhibitions, but most of the exhibitions are curated by the chief curator and myself. So that gives you a little, just a little overview of what it's all about. And if there's no questions, oh, I forgot one thing. You can tour this institution by appointment. We'll coordinate a tour. We do tours for organizations, sororities, fraternities, you name it, family reunions. We're all about that. But on Saturday, every Saturday, come rain or come shine, if you walk in at 12 o'clock noon, whether it's one person or 500 people walk in, my library assistant will give you a grand tour of this institution every Saturday. So, are there any questions? Oh, so I did pretty good then. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. This has been a wonderful collaboration with UC Berkeley, and of course, Barbara is just she's my new best friend. Barbara, come on up. And I'm gonna pass this baton to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you again to AMLO and Vita. It's been a pleasure working with you, and it's really a dream come true to host this event here. And now I'm going to pass it off to Professor Michael Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Let me begin by offering a welcome to everybody. It's great to see you all here on a Saturday. Thank you all so much for coming out. We hope to have we will have a great program for you, a necessary program for you. And I just want to offer welcome to everyone here on behalf of the Band Scholars Project at UC Berkeley and the Department of African American Studies. We're thrilled to have you all here in the beautiful African American Museum and Library in Oakland, to which we have now been properly introduced. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Mark Cohen, and I'm a professor in the department, and I am the co-director of the Band Scholars Project, along with my illustrious colleagues, Eula Taylor, Nikki Jones, and Tiana Pichelle. My task today will be as brief as I can manage to make it. I'm going to offer many thank yous, a few brief remarks, and then I will introduce our panel, who are the people you, in fact, did come to see. I just want to thank, of course, the African American Museum and Library in Oakland, particularly Vita Silva and Marco Frazier, and the Oakland Public Library System for collaborating with this event. It's great to be working with these public institutions, public enterprises. This is what the work of the public university is and should be. I want to thank Ms. Daphne Muse for curating this event, organizing it, and putting it all together. This is her vision manifest. I want to thank our panelists, who I will introduce in a moment. I want to thank the AV team from Berkeley here for recording the event, in particular Justin Wu in the back there with the blinking lights. I want to thank Nicole Brown of the Oakland Public Library for creating a companion book list of banned African American books, children's books and other books for this event. Our co-sponsors in the Berkeley English Department and the Bay Area Book Festival for sponsoring this, and of course to Barbara Montano, without whose formidable organizing skills none of this would be possible and none of us would be here. This event is funded by a generous grant from the Mellon Foundation and the Spencer Foundations. Now, the Band Scholars Project was inspired initially by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' claim in a speech announcing the banning of DEI programs and ethnic studies teaching in Florida public higher education in 2023. He said that students interested in critical race theory or gender studies should, in his words, quote, go to Berkeley. While we appreciate the governor's endorsement of our campus and its ongoing influence in these fields, DeSantis' compliment was clearly a threat, promising an expanded attack on public education and an educated public by first attacking the study of race, gender, and sexuality in public universities. When the Banned Scholars Project first began, we were monitoring the expansion of Ron DeSantis', quote, war on woke as it spread from Florida to Texas, Utah, Tennessee, Indiana, and elsewhere before finding a prominent place in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. Since then, well, you all know what's coming out of Washington. Renewed imperial bluster, enforcing of a fixed gender binarism, and banning of DEI, while blaming diversity initiatives for everything from hiring for everything from plane crashes to wildfires. We believe, and the grant that we are a part of affirms, that to be part of the public university must not only be to defend public universities and public higher education, but to defend the very idea of an educated public and the common good that comes with it. And that is our common responsibility, to advocate for our students, to defend the diversity of our faculty and staff, and to stand for the greater civic good embodied in African American studies, public higher education, public education in general, as well as the fundamental constitutional rights of free speech, academic freedom, and the right to read, think, purchase books, take them out of libraries, to write said books, to publish said books, so as to contribute to the purposes of a wider educated public. This comes in the face, then, of a rising tide of fascist stupidity that radically aggrandizes the power of books and reading in the name of turning the ordinary day in, day out challenge of learning into a menace, a threat, that it goes by the name of indoctrination, discrimination, or even the phantasm of abuse. The mere existence of Eno's book in a library threatens the possibility of child abuse and must thus be banned, eradicated, eventually perhaps burned. And as we know, in any society where books are burned, people will soon follow. And so the Banned Scholars Project is an attempt to push back against these divisive, racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic state and now federal policies with the strongest weapons available to us: solidarity. And so we have been committed to inviting scholars from around the country who are facing this threat directly in their classrooms, with their students, in their daily experiences, educators and activists. And today, we are proud to welcome our widest circle yet, a panel of authors, editors, librarians, and educators in this public space off the Berkeley campus to address the urgency of this moment. So I want to thank all of you deeply for being here and showing the concern of what this moment demands of us. So let me just turn to introduce our panel here. And let me begin with who will serve as our moderator, Catherine Norman. Catherine Norman is the president of the California Librarians Black Caucus and is the library consultant at Quality Metrics. She has experience as an academic librarian and has worked in multiple segments of the educational environment. Carolyn served as the state-level library and learning resource specialist and program specialist with the Chancellor's Office of the California Community College System, governing more than 100+ college libraries across the state. She has been instrumental in advancing initiatives at the local, state, and national level, and she received a Lifetime Achievement Award and a Distinguished Achievement Award from the Association of California Colleges for tutors and learning assistants. So she is an illustrious member of our librarians community here, particularly Black librarians, whose importance has already been presented to us, but will be reinforced by today's moderator. I do know what time it is. Moving down, let's just do this down the list. Innosanto Nagara is a best-selling children's book author and a personal friend from here in the Bay Area, so it's a pleasure to see you. His book, A is for Activist, was named by PEN America's recent report as one of the most banned books of 2024 and probably for many years before that, so congratulations. I do wonder if that is not just the title, it's like the A, so it's sort of the first on every conceivable list of books to be banned, but it's also, T is for trans, and that's enough to get you removed. So we thank Eno Eno was born and raised in Jakarta, Indonesia, at the height of the New Order dictatorship, and his father was a dissident poet and playwright who often worked under threat of censorship for his works. Eno moved to the U.S. in 1988. studies zoology, but instead became an activist and a graphic designer. He's worked as a freelance designer at a range of activist organizations and campaigns, including developing the design department of Inkworks Press in Berkeley. In 2002, he founded the Design Action Collective in Oakland. And in 2012, Eno wrote and illustrated A is for Activists, which became a best-selling children's board book. He's then written numerous other children's books on social justice themes, including M is for Movement, and I think that leaves him at least 24 other titles that he can develop from there. Oh, the Things We're For, and a number of other things. Eno is also a founding member of the Social Justice Children's Books Collective and has held an annual gathering of social justice themes children's books creators for the past 8 years, and is cooperating with the Bay Area Book Festival on this project. Nicholas, or Nico Perez, we're working our way down the line here, is the program manager for the Campus Free Speech at PEN America, so he's not busy at all. In this role, he advances PEN America's efforts to catalyze a more informed civic culture through free expression, education, and the rising generations and the general public, and supports advocacy, analysis, and outreach in the national debate around free speech and inclusion in higher education. Nico led the Next Gen PEN America, which is PEN America's campaign dedicated to empowering a new generation of free expression advocates and building a youth advocacy network that can work together to facilitate positive change. Perez previously worked for Columbia University's Human Rights Advocate Program and consulted for the Human Rights Education and Training sections at the United Nations. Next is Diane Wachtell, is the executive director of the New Press, an award-winning not-for-profit public interest book publisher, and which she co-founded with Andre Schifrin in 1990. And I know that you all have read these books and have them on their shelf, starting with Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow and Jim Lowen's Lies My Teacher Told Me, and all of Studs Terkel, and the original critical race studies reader, which has got to be on your pen list of most banned books in the world. These before joining the New Press, and specializing in works on criminal justice, progressive education, race, national security, and the law. Before founding the New Press, Diane Wachtell worked at Pantheon Books and Alfred A. Knopf, and is now taken up a real central place in not only just in left-wing book publishing, but nonprofit book publishing. And then last but not least is our very own Miss Daphne Muse, who is the curator of tonight's event, an educator and cultural broker. Educator and cultural broker Daphne Muse is the elder in residence in the Abolitionist Democracy Project and the Black Studies Collaboratory in the Department of African American Studies and African Diaspora Studies at UC Berkeley. The author of 4 books. Her social commentaries and articles have been published in The Atlantic, The Black Scholar, Mothering Magazine, and has aired on public radio. She has recently returned to writing a novel, which we look forward to. Yeah, solid. Which we all look forward to. And is an expert and scholar in the field of particularly children's literature, African Americans' children's literature. So please join me in welcoming our illustrious panel, and I will hand it over. I promise it will only be one thing. Cards, so we passed out cards, and there are pens back there. So if you have questions that arise and as they emerge, I encourage you to write these on these cards. We will collect them, and when we get to this sort of public Q&A session, we will work off of these cards, all right? So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Michael and Barbara, and thank each of you for attending. We hope this will be an inspirational session for you. As indicated, my name is Carolyn Norman, and I just want to give you a brief little additional information. I am the president of the California Librarians Black Caucus. How many of you have heard of that? Non-librarians, how many of you have heard of the California? Okay, so we've been around for more than 50 years, and in 2022, we celebrated 50 years. We are a statewide organization. At one point, there was a Northern California chapter and a Southern California chapter. We've since consolidated. I think the majority of Black librarians are in Southern California. We have to do something about that in Northern California here. I've worked primarily in academic libraries, so I've not been privy to banned books. The thing that attracted me about this presentation is the hostage of ideas. As an academic librarian, we often, as a librarian period, but more so in academia, you may not realize that the information you need may not be published or may not be available through a vendor that you can purchase items from. So your information is being banned and or held hostage. On a personal level, I've always been interested in what the researcher has available to them when they go to write that book or draw that illustration. So if it's not available, once again, it is banned and or censored. So it's a different way of looking at the information that is available to us. I have to also say I toured this beautiful building today, and I was overwhelmed by the diversity of information that is available in the Black arena. I had to go back and take pictures of the things that I can't find. And when you find a Black book, I've discovered this years ago, buy it then. When you go back the next day, it's not going to be there. Okay, it's not going to be there. And so I urge you to buy, to collect, to share. And if you haven't taken time to tour the first building, the first floor, tour it, please. It's worth it. Okay. The Black librarians have been working on several projects over the last year, and our participation here grew out of an activity that we did early last year. We started doing a strategic plan, and one of the things that came out of this plan was to increase our visibility as well as to improve the access of information from our perspective as such. And we did a presentation in October. As a result of that particular presentation at the California Library Association conference, someone recommended us to the Women's Missionary Society of the African American Methodist Church. They had a national conference in Garden Grove, California, and I went to college in Orange County, and I was just surprised that there was an AME church in Garden Grove, because when I went to school there in the 70s, it wasn't big enough to have an AME church yet. So we had more than 800 people there. The handout that you have that deals with hostility or honoring Black librarians, there's a handout that you have that's talking about banned books, and it's talking about this particular activity. That handout was produced for them by Nicole Brown, who is with the Oakland Public Library, and myself. Because I'm not from a banned book arena, she provided information, tremendous support to me to help me understand so that I can indeed help others understand what banned is. I can talk about the other end, how to advocate, but she talked about the other part, how to ban, and what you're looking at from that perspective. And from that presentation, we're here today. And so I thank you for helping us. And it's not just me helping, but each of you are going to go out and share with all your friends. Okay? So we're about spreading the word about that. So I've given you just a little bit about me, a snippet. We will be continuing to work within the arena of dealing with banned books and hostages and holding ideas hostage. So now I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share a little bit about, tell us about your work as it relates to literary censorship, and has your work been censored, and or how do you combat literary censorship? So, Diane, would you start? Well, actually, we'll start with Daphne and then work our way this way.
Okay. I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank my colleagues, historian Dr. Michael Cohen and project manager Barbara Montano, the queen of logistics, for inviting me to join them in organizing this panel. I feel as though I'm in a serious moment of deja vu, for in the early 2000s, I was on a panel celebrating Banned Books Week with historian Leon Litwack, poet Robert Haas, and anti-war activist Daniel Ellsberg at Black Oak Books in Berkeley. And now my former editor at the New Press, Diane Wachtell, joins us in the 2025 cycle of Rising, Roaring, and Resisting, and the Holding of Ideas Hostage. As I join this panel, I'm reminded of the fact that in 1955, I was an 11-year-old child in the 5th grade, growing up in Washington, D.C., listening to people speak in hushed tones, watching people lose jobs, and reading headlines with the names of architects of the Red Scare, which went from 1947 to 1959, led by Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy and attorney Roy Cohen, the mentor to he who desecrates the resolute desk in the Oval Office. The ALA has been at the forefront of liberating literature, and in 1982, the American Library Association established Banned Book Week, and the ALA's Office for the Intellectual Freedom recorded more than 6,000 challenges. According to PEN America, in 2023-24, over 10,000 books were banned in public schools during the 2023-24 school year. 22% of those books focused on or referenced race and racism. Black and progressive bookstores have stood strong and not wavered in standing with authors and illustrators to protect censored and banned books. In 1973, Alice Childress' young adult novel, Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich, a riveting novel about a 13-year-old heroin addict, was sledgehammered as un-American. The narrative focused on the infiltration of addiction because of marginalization, disenfranchisement, and public policies. In a field that continues to fight its way to publication, Black children's books are sometimes challenged or banned before the ink dries on the pages. In 2022, Amina Lukman Dawson's Newbery Award-winning novel Free Water was challenged, the precursor being banned. Told from the multiple points of view, including formerly enslaved children, the born-free children of the Maroon community Freewater, and the enslavers, it is set in a fictional community. The intriguing and historically grounded novel chronicles 12-year-old Homer and his 7-year-old sister Ada's journey to escape enslavement and navigate their way to Freewater. The theme of this book struck a deep chord, reminding me of a Maroon community of Jukas I visited in Suriname in 1970, a South American country colonized by the Dutch in the 17th century. During my 54 years in the field of education, I conducted workshops, wrote curriculum, published books, and taught a course entitled Ebony Visions and Cowrie Shell Dreams, Black storytelling and children's literature across the generations. The course included a lecture on book banning and censorship. Students were astonished that award-winning books about hair, slavery, and cultural celebrations, as well as American Library Association winning biographies, were banned back to the whack. Were banned to the whack, the black at every turn. In the course, students were required to create projects instead of sitting for final exams. In the 2023 class, UC Berkeley media major Alyssa Jade Poole created Words in Chains, a film focused on contemporary book banning, which includes the voices of several young people at a San Francisco Public Library forum. Her multiple efforts to secure an interview with Moms for Liberty were not responded to, and the unbridled hypocrisy of Moms for Liberty co-founder and Sarasota, Florida school board member Bridget Ziegler are so reflective of their values, and then not. Ziegler is featured on a sex tape with another woman and her husband, Christian Ziegler, who was accused of rape. Now these are people banned in the Little Children's books. During this most recent banning barrage, 13 people and the dictums of Project 2025 were major forces behind a host of current bans. While the band beast strums on its tin drum, a single complaint can result in the removal of a book in certain counties in Florida. George Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue, Matthew Cherry's Hair Love, and Jason Reynolds' All American Boys have to be moved across state lines under a Chick-fil-A bigoted buttered biscuit. And the richness of Black storytelling is now being buried under AI, the duplicity of alt-right Christianity, and the assaults on DEI, which have gotten so utterly ridiculous as to now ban the battleship Enola Gay. In my own personal experience, the Band Brigade first came for me in 1991 when I was the executive editor of Children's Advocate News magazine. I had taken it from a newsletter to a nationally recognized award-winning publication read by educators, policymakers, parents, and librarians. I had the utter audacity to devote a feature on books for what was then referred to as gay and lesbian parents. The Reverend Lou Sheldon, the head of the Traditional Values Coalition, lodged a complaint against the California Office of Education, which funded the news magazine, and he also orchestrated a visit to my office by one of his Sacramento devotees to address the matter personally. After serving 5 years at this award-winning publication, my services were terminated by the superintendent of the Department of Education. Sheldon's surveillance persisted, and in 1997, he issued a complaint to Disney regarding Prejudice, Stories of Hate, Ignorance, Revelation, and Transformation, a collection of stories for young adult readers I edited for Hyperion, which was a division of Disney at the time. From awarded classics to little-known titles, banning has swept across the country at warp speed. And with Project 2025 in play, and the literary inquisition is abetting the decline of the American mind, its curiosity, intellectual fervor, and simple joy of the book being integral to our lives. Sometimes, and also sometimes, the book is our best friend. From the ancestral voices of pre-colonial griots from Mali, Morocco, Ghana, Benin, and across the breadth of the African continent, to W.B. Du Bois and Jessie Redmond Fawcett's Brownie books, to the golden age of Black children's literature that emerged in the 60s, to the now, the literature endures. We now have a treasure trove of classics, including works by Eloise Greenfield, Tom Feelings, Virginia Hamilton, and Nikki Giovanni. Newbery and MacArthur award-winning author Jacqueline Woodson harvested the legacy of Hamilton, the first Black children's author to receive the Newbery and MacArthur awards. For those of you who are not familiar with Hamilton's work, think Toni Morrison. A consummate storyteller, Hamilton would laud the rap-brary, the Chicago librarian where rap meets the page. Librarian by day and rapper by night, Roy Kinsey believes in the power of storytelling to transform lives, build empathy, and create community. Like thousands of librarians across the country, his library serves as a sanctuary, keeping banned and challenged books safe. Across the canon of the discipline of Black children's literature, scholars including Violet Harris, Ebony Thomas, and Mackie Morehouse have formed alliances with librarians including Natosha Ford, LA High School librarian Diane Howell-Taylor, and Las Vegas librarian Billy Allen to ensure that Black children's literature remains integral to the foundation and literary anchor, cultural and historical landscape of readers and inquisitive minds across the generations. Now, in the words of the iconic civil rights Marks, Mississippi folk hero, Junebug Jabbo Jones, and the third cousin twice removed from Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, I've been out here since 1961 fighting for civil rights and putting that big old D back in democracy. Folk down round in here, up there in Washington, D.C., keep trying to take it off. But I just want my children and their children to know exactly what it means so they can have their rightful place, not only at the table, but to build it, set it, and write books about how they did all of that.
I think we just had a wonderful experience here. Thank you, Miss Daphne. I don't know who wants to follow that. Okay, Diane.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you, Michael, for helping to organize this. Thank you to my fellow panelists, to Vida for hosting us in this magnificent building, just stunning. And as was mentioned, Daphne did a book with the New Press probably 25 years ago, a huge, huge undertaking. It was called the Multicultural Catalog, and it was a catalog of every children's and YA book, but with a multicultural theme at that point in the 1980s, right? Late 80s, early 90s?
Up to about 95.
Through 95. That was a multi-year endeavor. That was amazing. So it's incredible to be here with Daphne. Thank you for including me. So the New Press, as Michael was kind enough to say, is a not-for-profit public interest book publisher. Our goal is to bring new voices into the national conversation, to put interesting, progressive ideas on the table, and to use our books to try to leverage social change. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit public interest book publisher. In addition to publishing Daphne's book 25 years ago, about 30 years ago, we published the key book in the critical race theory movement. It was called, not surprisingly, Critical Race Theory. The key writings that formed the movement. It was edited by a bunch of people. The lead editor was Kim Crenshaw, who you may be aware of. Since then, we've done lots and lots of other books on topics including structural racism, LGBTQ plus issues, police brutality, environmental justice, economic inequality. Basically, almost every New Press book is probably a candidate for being banned. So kind of de facto, we're at the heart of this movement to push back on book banning, like it or not. Also, I would say the Holocaust, climate change, I mean, the list goes on. So in some states, a teacher could actually be arrested for handing a student a New Press book, which just kind of blows my mind. Anyway, what I wanted to do now, as all of this new book banning started in about 2022, we wanted to understand who was being affected and how, and we formed a partnership with the Zinn Education Project. As you may know, that is a group of progressive K-12 educators. And together with Zinn Project, we sent out a survey. And the idea was you could have a free New Press book if you would write back to us and tell us whether you were affected by the book bans, and if so, how. So, and the books you could choose from were, you could have a copy of Critical Race Theory, you could have The New Jim Crow, you could have Lies My Teacher Told Me, you could have Monique Morris's fantastic book, Push Out, about the criminalization of Black girls in school, or you could have Mariam Kaba's No More Police. Talk about a provocative book. Anyway, so what I'm just going to read to you now as an opening salvo is some of the representative responses we got from different states across the country. The states are in alpha order, and I'm just going to zoom through them. Alabama, we can no longer teach Black history prior to 1970. Arizona, we have a hotline for anyone to denounce any history that is not the mainstream history. Arkansas, in our department, we are afraid to discuss themes of race or racism at all for fear of being reprimanded due to parental complaints. Florida, I have cleared my bookshelf for fear of felony charges. Idaho, our Holocaust education is being curtailed, and anything that can be interpreted as social justice is not allowed. Iowa, teachers in my state are discouraged from teaching real history and are having books banned in classrooms. New Hampshire, The New Hampshire Commissioner of Education wants the power to subpoena teachers for breaking the divisive concepts law. Some right-wing groups in the state put out bounties for teachers who break the law. Oklahoma, I have been told to stop teaching Toni Morrison's recitative just this year by the principal. Also asked to take down a small poster which dealt with race. I'm having to put my home address down here because I'd probably get in trouble if I had a book such as Critical Race Theory sent to me at school. Tennessee, there's been many laws put into place in Tennessee that affect us, like making sure that we're not making students feel badly about certain topics like racism and systemic oppression. Texas, we are legally not supposed to discuss slavery at all, and I teach the Civil War. It's mind-boggling. And Virginia, the curriculum is being whitewashed, and a hotline has been set up for parents to report teachers. And then we did a separate survey of university teachers, and I'm just going to read you one representative one from Texas. My most recent research used critical race theory as a base. Since CRT has been officially banned and DEI offices are being closed, we are definitely feeling the sting of book banning, thought banning, talk banning, you name it. So I'm going to leave it there for now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nico Perez. I work for PEN America. It's really a privilege to be in this space, to be with this company, and to represent PEN America and to talk to you about the work that our organization has been doing for the past few years. If you haven't heard of PEN America before, we are a literary and human rights organization that was founded over 100 years ago. 1921 was when the PEN Club formed. It was a group of writers in London who came together, basically committing to fight for and advocate for freedom of expression to allow their craft, to basically render their craft possible. The American chapter of the PEN Club in London formed in 1922. And then that grew, so the American Club grew to become what is today PEN America. And the PEN Club in London ended up becoming somewhat of our parent organization, PEN International. And just as there's PEN America, there's PEN centers in over 100 countries around the world. These are made up of writers, artists, activists, journalists, intellectuals, scholars, all committed to fighting for freedom of expression. So we've been around for a really long time, and we've been active on free expression issues in a lot of different areas. Today, because today we're active on a variety of different issues. We are very, very active on the book bans issue, which we'll talk a lot about. I have a lot of information data to share. We also work on combating the spread of mis and disinformation, censorship online, online harassment, online abuse. We have a team that works on international free expression issues, helping writers, artists, activists, journalists in foreign countries who have been wrongly detained for their expression, help get them access to advocacy and assistance through our Freedom to Write programs. But essentially, where I sit at Penn and the folks on my team, I am a part of our free expression and education team. So wherever you think freedom of expression intersects with education, that is what we focus on. So we have a freedom to read team, a freedom to learn team, and a campus free speech team. And essentially our freedom to read team is the ones fighting the book bans. We document instances of books being banned in public school classrooms and libraries. We publish all of that data. It's all, I'll get into that a little bit later of just how we collect that data, but it's very much in the trenches, grassroots, researching every day what is going on in the news, publicly available information on instances of books being banned. That's how we comprise.
PEN is the best. Like, you are the resource, right, that everyone uses. It's incredible.
And
Thank you for your service.
No, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues on the Freedom to Read team, Dr. Taslin Magnuson, Sabrina Baeta. These are folks who, and Madison, that team, they're the ones every day tracking all of these based on public reports. And so really, they're the ones who deserve all of the credit in terms of giving us the data that we can work from as advocates. So that's our Freedom to Read team. Then we also have our Freedom to Learn team, which is the one that tracks the educational censorship and legislative attacks on educators and education. And then we have our campus free speech team, which is where I'm currently situated, although we all, intersect. Our campus free speech team, we work with students, faculty, and administrators on campuses across the country to help them navigate issues of freedom of expression on their campuses. As you can imagine, some of that is, issuing public commentary around things going on in the news. Like, we've been very seized by what's going on at Columbia recently. In one sense, and then in another sense, most of our work is actually really constructive, visiting campuses directly to help meet with their communications teams, their DEI offices, their residence life, to help them foster dialogue on their campuses between folks of different political backgrounds, different points of view. And so my background, where I'm coming to this conversation, I currently sit on our campus free speech team, so most of my work is in higher ed. But for the past few years, I led Next Gen Pen America, which was a campaign that reached 10,000 students nationwide through the development of advocacy institutes, fellowship programs, and student summit events, which a lot focused on freedom to read. So we worked with Brooklyn Public Library on our Freedom to Read advocacy institutes, training hundreds of students around the country virtually to fight book bans. We also did a lot of work. I've done a lot of work hosting Freedom to Read advocacy summits for high school students here in California, a few actually in NorCal with the San Francisco Public Library. You mentioned Alyssa and her video project. I had a moment there where I was realizing her video project, the students that she interviewed were at a Pen America Freedom to Read student summit. Yes. And so that was something I had organized with the Mix at the San Francisco Public Library, a teen resource center there. Highly, highly shout them out. So I'm coming to this with kind of the student advocacy kind of engagement, experience, but also conscious of the challenges higher ed is facing. And so I'm, eager to share more of some of our analysis and data as we go forward.
Okay. Enya?
My turn. Thank you for having me on this panel with all these illustrious people. It's an honor. Usually I'm talking to a bunch of kids, so this is a little bit of a different thing for me. You're not in third grade, and I don't get to ask you your ages. But I am looking forward to the Q&A, because hopefully the questions will be as interesting. I guess I'm on this panel because I'm a bit of a case study. I wrote this book, A is for Activist, in 2012 when my kid was 2 years old. And I originally just wanted to write the book to be the book that I wanted to read to my kid, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I ended up self-publishing a small number of them by today's count. So it's, I printed a few thousand of them, distributed them, and was surprised to find out that I wasn't the only one that wanted that book for my kid. And at the time when I was writing it, I had to make some choices, right, about sort of like what was going to be in it. And like I mentioned, T is for trans. At the time I was writing, it's like, is this going to, if it goes out in the world, is this going to be problematic? But I decided I wanted to be, this is a book for my kid. I'm going to be on the right side of history. I'm going to put in the things that I want to put into it. And interestingly, when it went out in the world, initially the biggest sort of pushback I got wasn't for that stuff, it was for the hot dog, all the vegans who were saying that this book was, and I was like, it says healthy hot dogs, please, so it doesn't have to be meat hot dogs, you can define that how you want. But that was, I got a lot of angry letters about that, surprisingly. But since then, it has become a bit of a poster child for, banned children's books. I don't actually have it, I don't track where all it gets banned and challenged. I see it in the Pan America reports. Governor DeSantis did do a video where he actually read sections of it and talked about, bragging about having gotten this book pulled. It's been, banned in quite a few different states. I don't have a good track of all those things. But for me, I think So part of my story is, these books, I didn't expect my book to be in schools, right? So it's not about whether or not my book has a right to be in this or that schools. This is up to the teachers. This is up to the educators. This is up to the people working with the book to decide whether this book is what they want to use. The idea that it would be categorically banned, and that that's the problem, right? The other sort of point that keeps on coming up in this world that I ended up being a part of people doing social justice themed children's books, is that for a lot of books, it's not even about whether it gets banned by the time it gets to the Florida schools. It's about that they don't get published in the first place. When I talked, I was talking about my book being banned at one point, and this author I know, Dr. Goldfarbashi, and who wrote P is for Palestine, she's like, I see your books all the time. My book, will never be anywhere near being banned because it was never, I had to self-publish it and it would never get into the classrooms in the first place. And so a lot of my work through the Social Justice Children's Book Fair that we do every year is about trying to advocate for and push against the gatekeeper system that keeps people from our stories, own voices stories, from being published in the first place. Unfortunately, now it's actually gotten worse because this whole movement to ban books it's not only just about getting them published, it's actually, even if you do get them published, even being able to keep them available. So it has gotten worse, and I don't want to downplay that part of it, but the problem has been there for a long time, and it's been a part of the fabric of the whole publishing industry to begin with. And I think a big part of this, I did this graphic design project for New York University. They were talking about the dark money behind Moms for Liberty and all these organizations. I think the thing to remember is that these are not grassroots organizations that are, it's not like everybody's suddenly upset about these books being available. There is a well-funded campaign that's run by billionaires that is trying to create this moment for them. And, so we have to be careful about how we respond to this and not believe too much that there really is this backlash. The difficulty of getting these books published has always been there. We need diverse books, all these kind of movements that have been building up have actually been successful, and this is a backlash from a small group of people with a lot of money that has been making it seem like it's something that now we have to be quiet about. That's
okay. Thank you. That was great on this one question here. Lots of information from each of our panelists, and you've actually stepped into part of the second question, which was going to focus on Nicholas and Diane, looking at the current state of book banning in the U.S. and how widespread is it. Daphne gave us a little bit about it. Nicholas and Diane, are there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, he's the expert.
I could jump in to share, the resources and the research that Penn has on. Oh, thank you. Let me jump into to share and kind of start off with state of book bans. What does it look like? Where are things at today? And in the past school year, there were over 10,000 instances of book bans. It's driving the Freedom to Read team crazy because it's almost, and there was a debate internally, at Penn of can we even track the amount that is happening now? A small team, checking the news every day and keeping track of all of this stuff. 10,000 is what we know of, okay? Most of these, and how is that, scale considering prior years? It was about 4,000 the year prior and about 1,000 the year before. So it's almost tripling year over year, okay? In terms of publicly available information about these instances of book bans. And so, how have they come to be? You mentioned, Moms for Liberty, and we are aware that, the majority of these book bans have been supercharged by two main factors. One has been the presence of these local advocacy groups on the ground, who have been well-funded and well-organized. The other is state legislation being passed, oftentimes kind of coupling book bans with other efforts to censor educators. And so that specifically in states like Florida, especially where 40% of book bans are taking place, okay? Like the storm of book bans in Florida has been caused by those two main factors: a supportive state legislature and local groups on the ground. Now that they have a federal kind of, now that, now that Trump is back in power and we have a lot of kind of federal support now for these ideologies to ban DEI and book bans are getting kind of like caught up in all of this. It's almost like what was a storm before is now a potential hurricane, right? In terms of its severity of now you have an alignment of moneyed interests, you have an alignment of federal interests, state level interests, and well-funded local activists in particular areas who across the board aren't a wide movement, as wide a movement, but they have enough people in the right areas to swing, school boards and to swing state legislatures in certain ways to empower them. So that's how those are the main factors that we've seen fuel those numbers. In terms of, the breakdown, 29 states, 220 districts, Florida being the biggest, right? But Iowa is also catching up to Florida. And Penn, we published these reports. Our most recent report from 2023-2024, we found that 44% of the book bans had featured people of color, 39% featured LGBTQ characters or themes, 57% were targeted based on sexual conduct, 60% of the books were young adult literature. And we also published a recent report, cover to cover, which looked into the books themselves a little bit more to try and figure out like what is it in these books that's really upsetting people. So 57% are being banned based on sexual content. Our team, our Freedom to Read team, analyzed those books that were being banned for sexual content and found that only 13% of them had actual depictions of sex. And then within that, a lot of the sex scenes in these books were off the page. So they weren't necessarily described, but they were alluded to in a certain way. So this whole notion of, porn in schools is, when you statistically is not happening. And so there's a lot of boogeymen out there. That's one of them. But there's some, preliminary information for us to start from.
In response to Eno's comments, not all publishers are being cowardly, but we do say every book has a spine, but not every publisher does. So I'm going to talk, this is all horrible, terrible news, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the new press is doing to try to push back. And a lot of it is in partnership with places like Penn, the ACLU, the NAACP, LDF. So we set up something that we called our Forbidden Books Initiative. I thought forbidden was catchier than banned somehow. Anyway, our Forbidden Books Initiative is funded by the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Open Society Institute. People recognize that this is a real problem. The first thing we did, and it was the first time we'd done it, I've been at the New Press from the beginning, we filed an amicus brief in the Florida Stop Woke case, which is a case mostly about college-level bans on DEI and so forth, but that has a real impact on New Press books. The jury's out on that. I think we won the first round, and it's been appealed, and we're waiting to hear the final ruling. It was a good initial ruling, but we'll see. We created our own reading list. I'm sure you've all heard, don't say gay. So ours are called Just Say Gay, Just Say Holocaust, Just Say Criminal Justice Reform, and they're all on our website, and we've blasted them out to our followers, et cetera, et cetera. We've donated over 10,000 books in the last 2 years, mostly to teachers and a lot actually to incarcerated people. And there are these great organizations like Books Behind Bars. It's actually hard to get books to incarcerated people, but we've collaborated with partners all across the country to do that. We continue to advocate publicly, obviously against book banning, like panels like today, and in defense of the First Amendment. So our social media, our blog posts, e-blast, print ads, postcards. I've been on panels. I've been screamed down by Moms for Liberty in Montclair, New Jersey. 2 Moms for Liberty plants showed up. It is definitely a concerted movement. It is not a grassroots thing. I did the 2024 Charleston Library Conference, and wherever there's an opportunity to kind of fill people in on what's going on, we try to take advantage of it. Then the other thing that we've done is we've commissioned a range of very provocative books to push back. Like, that's what we do. So we did a graphic edition of Lies My Teacher Told Me. We're bringing back a very interesting book called Defending My Enemy. Some of you, if I say the word Skokie, that may mean something to you. That was a famous case where a group of Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, the home to many Holocaust survivors. And the lead attorney who represented the Nazis for the ACLU and took a huge amount of flack for it, a guy named Aryeh Nair, wrote a book called Defending My Enemy. And that book is a defense, of a very robust defense of the First Amendment. And Aryeh's point is, if I censor the Nazis, tomorrow I'm going to be censored. And the answer to free speech is more, or to hate speech is more speech. So we're reissuing that book with the new chapter about First Amendment issues today. We're bringing out a book called Erased, True Stories About Race You Probably Weren't Taught in School. We're bringing out a book on parental rights called Angry White Moms. And we're bringing out a very moving book about a family in Alabama with a trans kid called And the Dragons Do Come. And then I'll just talk briefly about our 2023 gala was a Stand with the Band gala. And we honored, well, the MC was Christy Hefner of the Playboy First Amendment Foundation, who is a huge free speech advocate. And we honored a guy named Steve Pico. Now, that name may or may not mean something to you. Steve was, many, many years ago in the 70s, the lead plaintiff in the precedent-setting lawsuit about book banning. The lawsuit was called Island Trees School District versus Pico. Steve Pico, when he was a high school kid on Long Island, they tried to ban 5 books from his school library, including like Kurt Vonnegut and stuff he wanted to read. And he sued. I mean, he took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. And they had to put the 5 books back in his library. And Island Trees is now the precedent case, right, for all the lawsuits that are happening to push back. We had the original attorney in that case there. And then, just to have some fun, we had a life-size cutout of Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. And you could have your picture taken handing him a banned book, which we got a kick out of that. Yeah, I mean, I think I could go on, but that's the core of it.
Thank you. You've answered quite a bit there, sharing some of the different tactics and things. One of the specific ones, well, 2 questions. One, Nico, you're saying there's more than 10,000 or so. Is it in one particular category, or are they the same books over and over? Do we have a sense of that?
Yeah. So we also publish, it can get pretty technical, and so like we publish our methodology on our website, but when it's 10,000 instances of book bans, and so like if a book is banning, The Bluest Eye, if a school is banning The Bluest Eye, but has 10 copies of the book, like that's still one book ban. And so you can imagine, like 10,000 book bans, there could be even more actual physical books being removed. And these book bans include not just like the removals of books, but restrictions of books that are being placed that weren't there prior. So new administrative hurdles, parental sign-offs that are being implemented, those are also being considered and counted as bans.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Librarians and teachers are being made villains.
Yes.
And being attacked in multiple ways, from death threats to being physically attacked in parking lots and letters, emails and texts written to them. So it's also a way of cutting into the number of people who have aspirations to be librarians and teachers. And it's heartbreaking because in a minute, there will be no teachers. There will
Yes.
be no librarians if we don't stop this from plowing us under this massive assault on intellectual freedom, curiosity, and making the book the enemy for children. Children are going to they're going to begin to see the book as the enemy. We can't let that happen. We absolutely cannot. I would like to make a note, just a quick announcement. There's a forthcoming book coming out called Prose to the People. It's a celebration. Oh, okay, you know about that book. Okay, girl, all right. It's a celebration of Black bookstores, and it is truly a love letter to Black bookstores. It's written by Atlanta-based writer Katie Mitchell, and it's due for publication next month. The Oasis in the Diaspora, My Rare Black Book Collection, and Drum and Spear Bookstore, which I managed from 1968 to 1971, are featured in this forthcoming book. And my Drum and Spear archive recently was acquired by the SNCC Legacy Project at Duke University. So for those of you who are interested in researching, who want to know more about the bookstores, and these stores have to be supported, and engage with the people in the bookstore. They know stuff. They really, we really know stuff, y'all. And we have been in the forefront of doing everything we can to counter the banning of books. So even if you don't have the money to spend, go in the store and browse. Ask questions. Open the pages. Look at the words. Fall in love with them.
Okay. One of the other questions, what are your organizations doing to defend literacy, freedom, and resist book banning? And you've touched on some of that, Nicholas and Diane. Is there others that you would like, anything else you'd like to add, or anyone else on the panel?
Yeah. So in addition to, publishing these reports, we're also we've also participated in advocacy and lawsuits. There's a lawsuit in Escambia County in Florida where I think one parent basically came in with a list of a ton of books, got them all banned for the whole district, and so a lot of different organizations kind of rallied to get involved in a lawsuit there. We do a lot of different public programming and events, public awareness, but largely I would say the main thing that our organization is focused on is really trying to provide as accurate data as possible to equip advocates to go fight these battles really across the country.
Has somebody cataloged the lawsuits?
I'm not sure.
It would be interesting to see a catalog of the lawsuits and like a description of maybe just a paragraph that provides narrative about the lawsuit, and that would be something really interesting for a law school student to do research around and to see where these suits intersect and how the resources can be allocated in ways that make it a more efficient process.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea, especially for someone to do further research, and I can also mention it to our Freedom to Read team. It's been my impression that I think most of the efforts to combat these book bans haven't been lawsuits. They have been essentially unfolding in school districts, school boards. So people have been, really trying to advocate by going to their school boards, by, offering comments and this kind of approach. But the lawsuits is really interesting, I think, to look into.
Yes.
I just joined the leadership committee of Publishers Against Book Banning, and here are just some advice that they share with the publishers. Don't self-censor your acquisitions. Guarantee the privacy of personal information about your authors, very important. Don't give out addresses, names of children. Refuse to provide ratings of books beyond current industry standards of categorization by age. Do not fold to this thing that you have to rate books according to their criteria. Do not include contractual language that impinges on authors' free speech, and provide security for your authors at their public events, which is sad but true.
Thank you. Okay, Daphne, you've been very, very articulate with lots and lots of information. So this one is focusing on you. What is the impact of book banning on children's literature and on children? You've given us some of that. And why is it important to defend banned children's books?
When you take a book away, I have it on, don't I? Oh, okay. When you remove the access, then you're not only removing, in some instances, history, but again, you're telling a child this is a bad thing. And so you shouldn't have access to it, which actually makes it more interesting, especially for teenagers. You tell them no, they want it, they say, okay. But I think that that parents who have, I'm going to focus on parents for a minute. Parents who have concerns about what their children are reading, they need to know the book before they express the concern, because a lot of them haven't a clue of what's in the book. They only heard Sister Thornton over there at the church said such and such. They don't know the content of the book. They also don't take the time. Many parents need to take more time to understand the interest of the child, because that interest is important for the evolution of the development of that child. And just because the parent isn't interested in the subject doesn't mean the child is not interested in the subject. And how do you have hard conversations? If these children can listen to rap, they can read these banned books. They can read these banned books.
If I can also offer some detail too, the parents they're not only not reading the books, they're going to sources like Book Looks. I'm not sure if folks in the room have heard of this, because this is one of the main resources Moms for Liberty and other advocates are using, where they're essentially, these extreme kind of, groups are rating these books and saying like, oh, this one is a 5 on this scale for whatever, right? And so parents who aren't even reading the books, they're just taking Book Looks and citing it as a source to go to their school boards and say, this got a 5 on this scale, and therefore it's porn. It's these strategies are really, they're not interested in reading the books, to be frank.
Just one other comment. During the McCarthy period, I was terrified that my Girl Scout manual was going to be banned. I was terrified because that's the book that I learned to read from. And if they had taken away my Girl Scout manual, there was going to be hell to pay. So this continues to strike a very deep chord in me. And I will fight till my last breath for every child to read whatever book they deem significant for them to read, to bring them joy, to bring them hope, to allow their imaginations to go wild. Because this also feels like a time when the imagination is being raped. It's just being pillaged, and we're creating these little robots that do the little AI tap dance and the little digi dance, as I call it, and whatever.
As you talk about ideas, that leads us into the next question. In the area of book banning, what keeps you creative? Inyo and Daphne and anybody else? Okay. What keeps you creative, Inyo?
You had mentioned this question earlier, and I was trying to think of what's useful to say about that. You know, I grew up under a military dictatorship where, you know, freedom of speech was not guaranteed, and you know, my father had to go into exile at one point, and I know, you know, my book cannot be published there even currently, but at the time would definitely have landed me in jail. And you know, but what was interesting about what happened, like, the quick answer is the creativity is not the problem, as far as I'm concerned. You know, under that, even those kind of circumstances, it actually was created a space for a particular kind of creativity. When in 1998, when the student movement overthrew the military dictatorship, everybody was worried that creativity was going to go down because it used to be everybody was so good at finding ways of criticizing the government, of saying things without actually saying it. Like that was, you know, that was the game that we all played. And now you can say whatever you want. You know, what's interesting in that, right? And so, but somehow or another, Indonesians have continued to be creative, despite not being under as much oppression. So, in some ways, the idea of there being an oppressive regime isn't to me a problem for creativity. You know, it still is a problem, and I don't want to downplay it because I think that, you know, we do need to. Back to your earlier question around, you know, the importance of these books. You know, there's the obvious reason, just, you know, freedom of speech, these ideas that it's important to be able to have the rights that we do. Americans kind of believe that they came up with the idea of freedom of speech, and so you would think that this would be a place where that would not be possible, and the fact that it's even coming close to that is a deterioration in the fabric, you know, of this society. And I think that it's important to fight it for that reason. I think for children's books in particular, it's, you know, all the things that people have always said about, you know, Rudine Sims Bishop talks about mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors being the, you know, what children's books provide to children, diverse children's books in particular. You know, these are all, you know, and everybody, it used to be you could say empathy, you know, obviously is a really important thing. Now they're even challenging whether that's a good word or not. And so, you know, for all those reasons, I think, you know, we do have to continue the fight. I think, yeah, to answer your question though, the creativity part, I think artists and creative people will continue to do that, and perhaps have to do it in more creative ways.
Daphne, thank you.
Just a note before I answer that question. The Bible is being rewritten. Yep, Project 2025 is rewriting the Bible, y'all. And it's going to be real interesting what they come up with. What makes me creative? Keeping the creativity flowing. Looking at you in this room and hoping that you young people, mostly young people, that you'll be sitting one day reading to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your aunties, the people you adopt to bring into your families. That's what keeps me creative. I'm 80. I have lived a full, wonderful, complicated, nutty life. And part of my mission is I want you all to be able to live the fullest lives possible. And that keeps me creative. How do I come in the moment of the greatest despair and come up with some knuckle-headed idea that somebody says, oh, you know what? I'm going to do that. And it works. That's what keeps me creative. That somebody nurtured me with creativity, I have to nurture future generations so that the creativity continues. So in the moments of greatest despair, example, During the McCarthy period, Thurgood Marshall argued at the Supreme Court, and guess what passed? Brown versus Board, in the thick of that era. So the impossible really can become possible in this cesspool that we are now in.
Thank you. What can individuals do to resist book bans? And how can we protect literary freedom through our own personal efforts? And that's been addressed a little bit by each of you. I like the Advocacy Institute that Nicholas talked about. I like the networking concept that Daphne talked about. And each of them did a little bit of something that we all have to band together. And the resource guide that was a part of your handout, Holding Ideas Hostage, that's an advocacy guide for each of you to be able to take with you. It talks about the different kinds of band, whether it's a censorship, as one of you talked about, where it's something that is behind the shelf that you have to ask for, or it's not in your catalog, but it's in the library, because if it's out there invisible or in the catalog, the librarian's job might be in jeopardy, the librarian's safety might be in jeopardy. And so that's also a way of banning and or censoring that information. So this resource guide talks about those types of things, so it gives you the power to be able to address something that is being challenged. It also provides a step-by-step guide from United Ban that talks, it's an organization that helps advocates, the advocacy of an individual or of a group, writing letters to your congresspeople, to your school boards, getting involved, holding meetings, having a readathon, read the book. Bring a group of people together and read the book and be able to challenge anybody else that is challenging your information. Very important to be, since most of these are taking place in the K-12 level, go to those school board meetings and don't leave after the Pledge of Allegiance. Stay until adjournment, because the people who are challenging it are staying till the very end. They're bringing their lunch, they're bringing their kids, their sleeping bags, whatever, and they're there until the very end, because that's when the issue that they want addressed will pass. And you won't be there in order to address that. So those are little things that can be done. All of you, if you're not a soror or in the Masonics or in some organization, use that as your network. If you are part of those, have a session, have Penn come in, or Daphne, somebody come in and do a presentation. Network with your local librarian. I don't care what color they are, network with them, because they all have the same challenge. A book that is being banned in one library, I don't care if it's in Brentwood, if it's in Marin County, if it's in Sacramento or wherever, it's being challenged across the network, and everybody has to deal with that. One of the things I'm curious about, and it may not be the data, but I file a lawsuit in LA, and I have this list of books. Well, I'm going to send that up to my friend in Napa, and they can file the same lawsuit, and let's just replicate it, and we'll send it over down to San Diego and over to Bakersfield. So they're networking. And a lot of us don't have that infrastructure in place in order to combat it. We used it many years ago when Harriet Tubman was freeing slaves. They had songs that helped them network. As we worked, they were slaves' lawsuits. They were part of a network. And we need to establish that kind of network and keep it going so that we can be able to address book challenges. And it's not the book, it's the idea, because it's the creativity that Inyo had. If he's harnessed it, he has a beautiful publication, but if he can't get it out there, then guess what? It's banned. So Okay, I have one other question here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael. Are we ready now, or do you have questions?
These are questions from the audience.
Okay, we'll take audience.
Take them in order, maybe.
Okay. Number one, how can students fight back against book banning and censorship?
I'll jump in here too, and also kind of to answer the other question of, like, what can individuals do? I was going to speak from, my experience working with students around the country. During the pandemic, when we were all online, right, that's when our Advocacy Institute started. So our first engagements with students, high school and college students, were virtual. And I remember one of our students was like, we had a voting rights a black female voting rights activist from Georgia come speak to our students about what she was doing on the ground. And this was during the 2020 presidential election, and some of our Gen Z students were just like, why bother? The world is crumbling. Our institutions aren't serving us. Like, why should we vote? Why should we be trying to be politically active? And our guest provided like really, really good insight on that. I thought was, I've heard it echoed in a lot of other activist fora, which is like, in order to create change, I think some people ask the question, should you work inside the system and are you complicit with the system, or should you be working outside the system to change it? And this activist from Georgia said, in order to create change, you have to work both. You have to work inside the system and outside the system in order to create the change that you want to see. So, what does that look like for students? What does that look like for individuals? There's a lot of different things, but I want to focus specifically on the way that technology is changing. That is going to impact so much all of these systems. And so I just wanted, the spread of mis and disinformation, I think we're seeing the ramifications of that every day. I think we need to learn how to talk to friends and family who share mis and disinformation. We have a guide at Penn America, but it's some of the examples of, how do you call in versus call out? What are the dialogue techniques? Where did you get those sources? Can we talk about where you found that? I'm finding different things. I think we need to identify the folks in our communities and in our lives who are, inadvertently, unconsciously kind of, feeding these crises. And I think one of the more potential, I guess, somewhat controversial takes, because as we're in higher ed and broadly trying to figure out, what are the ethics around utilities of AI and these new technologies, I just recommend and implore that we try to keep up as advocates. We have to know, I wouldn't say completely avoid, learn about AI, learn how others are using those tools, because the powerful are going to use them to amplify this issue. And so if we are kind of caught unprepared, right, I think that can present new challenges. So keep up with the tech, keep up with the media. I know it's hard to pay attention to the news, but we also have to bear witness. We have to bear witness so that we can, fight for change in our lives. But that's what I would start from.
Yeah, in terms of students, students have always been at the forefront of a lot of movements for social change, and I think amplifying those stories, I was looking up sort of places where my book was banned, and one of the places was in York School District in Pennsylvania, and I don't know, do you know this story is 23 or 22, and there was a student-led movement that overturned that, and so telling these stories, looking at what other people have done, I think is one possibility. Do you know more about that story?
Yeah, two of the activists from York County ended up being guest speakers for our Freedom to Read Institute, so other students were able to learn from them and their techniques.
Okay, another audience question, and it's addressed in two different ways. Can you say more about the corporate funding that supports Moms for Liberties and other groups, and what is their motivation and ultimate goal? And it's sort of reworded another way for you to think about it. What ideas or ideology do you think the U.S. is trying to push or create by banning books, and why is this dangerous? A lot to think about. Okay.
In terms of the money, in terms of the funding, I admit I haven't, I'm not as familiar with, the funders behind these movements, other than they are coming from large-scale, predominantly conservative-leaning organizations.
Daphne.
And within Project 2025, which if you have not read, please sit down and read it, because it is the map. It is the map for what is going on now. And there are sections in there that are devoted to controlling the voice, impacting public schools, and the Heritage Foundation out of Washington, D.C., has a lot of money behind these initiatives to ban and control the reading of, and censor, I should say, ban and censor books. So if anybody's interested, I actually have the entire thing online, and I printed it out to make sure that I sat down, and it's almost 1,000 pages.
Yes.
And I had a terrible headache, and I don't get headaches, but it was terrible after reading it. But it is really crucial that you understand what this document means at this point in time, and why the Heritage Foundation has played a key role in the funding of a number of these banning initiatives, and why they are married to Moms for Liberty.
The NYU report, and it was NYU Facing Race and another organization. I'm terrible with names and numbers, but you can look that up. They did a report called Dark Money, and I did an infographic for them about that. It had the Koch brothers, it was Betsy DeVos, the sources of the money and how those particular big name billionaires and who specifically they funded of all the organizations like Moms for Liberty.
There's been a number of acquisitions of our news sources, our newspapers, our radio networks, our television networks, and those are information sources that we need to look at seriously. We need to look at who owns them and what is their background, what is their focus. That helps us to understand what is being created. It's an ideal world from somebody else's, from the Rupert Murdochs, from the Jeff Bezos, from the Elon Musk, from the Koch brothers. It's their philosophy, their ideology. And if only 6 entities own 90% of our information sources, then you're getting I'll say a distorted view, depending on whose resource you're reading. It's important to look at multiple resources, to listen to multiple networks, so that you get that diverse bit of information. And you weigh it. I weigh both sources. What did this person say? What did this person say? And where can I find the truth? People are now discovering that, or the perceived truth. People are discovering that the Washington Post now is not as reliable, perhaps, as it has been in the past. I live in San Diego. My newspaper has been bought up 2 or 3 times. It's not as informative as I thought it might have been. When I lived in Sacramento, it was a McClatchy newspaper, which controls most of the Central Valley for California. What is the philosophy background of them? Who are they supporting? How much did they put into Project 2025 or any of these other entities that you may be opposed to? But we don't look at those things, and I think it's important that we look at the backgrounds of where we get our information. A lot of students are getting their information off of a platform called Discourse. What is it? Where did it come from? Who controls the information on it? We know about Twitter, we know about Instagram, but we know about these others. So I think it's important that we look at that. That's where that ideology is coming from. And while you're doing that, create your own ideology. Okay, let's do our own network. Okay, question number 3. Oh, let me ask, did that answer your question? Ideology, networking? Okay. Much of the national, what's that word? Is it discourse?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Much of the national discussion about book bans focuses on children's books, but there seems like the banner's framing. How do you see book banning and empathy for adult literature and democracy? Okay, I'm going to repeat it now that I can understand it. Much of the national discussion about book banning focuses on children's books, but there seems that that's where the banners are framing. How do you see book banning affect adult literacy and democracy?
I would say that, so about 60% so PEN America tracks instances of books being banned in public school classrooms and public school libraries. So almost inherently, we're tracking books that students can access and young people access. But when we consider adults, adult literature and also adults accessing literature, I think it's important for us to also think about the ALA and their data tracking instances of library book bans. But what I can say, so there's kind of two ways to think about it. 60% of the books being banned in public school classrooms and libraries are young adult literature. So it's literature that's specifically geared towards them. I want to say there's another, you could check the data online. Then there's like other segments of the bans that are adult literature geared towards adults, and then some like children's picture books. But yeah, I would point people towards that data, and then also thinking if you want to look for the impacts on adult learners and like adult literature, I would look at ALA's data and consider that.
I'll add something to that, if I may. Obviously, the new press doesn't publish children's stuff, so all of the stuff of ours that's being banned is at the college or the advanced high school level. Something I meant to talk about and forgot was many of you may have followed the whole debate about the new African American AP history curriculum. The books at the heart of that debate were almost all new press books, like it was Kim Crenshaw's Critical Race Theory, it was the new Jim Crow, that were originally in the curriculum, were challenged, and then the AP I can't remember the name of the organization that runs it, but folded, the College Board, thank you, it's been a while. The College Board folded and pulled those books, and there's been a lot of dissembling there. Ron DeSantis and the Florida governor's office denied that they had been involved in the review of the curriculum, but then documents came out showing that they had been at the heart of the review of the curriculum and had demanded that those books be pulled. The curriculum was revised to take many of these books out, and then P.S. the kicker, DeSantis announced that Florida wasn't going to adopt the curriculum after all. So yeah, it's just very frustrating.
And let's remember, The Color Purple has been banned, and then it was made into a movie. The Color Purple was rebanned, and then it was made into a Broadway play. The Color Purple continues to be banned since it was first published in 1983, across the decades. I'm convinced one of the reasons Toni Morrison won the Nobel Prize is because Sula was banned. So there's some things that people say, oh, you banned me? They banned you? Okay, we're going to award you the highest prize in the world. And that increases the readership, or it used to. But I think the variables around that are very different now, based on a lot of what you're saying about the data that you've collected. But The Color Purple will come up in another manifestation. It just seems to continue to live on and on and on, and Toni Morrison lives on and on and on, and Baldwin lives on and on and on. And I remember when Richard Wright's Native Son was banned.
But something that I think is relatively new, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is the criminalization of people who distribute banned, like there's banning and then there's criminalizing people, and that I think is a new, very, very dangerous development.
We have time for one more audience question, and It deals with literary or library censorship. In the academic setting, would a student's paper or thesis, their hypothesis, basically be that the institution refuses to accept the citing or does not fit when it focuses on ethnicity, be an example of banning or censorship? So if a student has a paper, their thesis, hypothesis, and the institution refuses to accept their citations, does it fit the focus?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And what can that student do?
Michael, I want you to answer that question. Yes.
Well, I mean, we're talking about fights over knowledge, right? What constitutes knowledge? I mean, we're talking about the breakup of consensus reality and the sense of, that we can inhabit whatever particular fictional political landscape we all want as this sort of breakdown of society itself, let alone democracy, decency, literacy, public education. So in that sense, I think, we in the academy, certainly have to keep doing what it is that we're doing. Like the desire to sort of knuckle under and hope that we can keep our heads down and this sort of fascist menace will not look our way. We might be able to duck the oncoming storm, but the long-term undermining of democratic and an educated public is affected by us censoring ourselves in terms of what we teach, what we assign, what we research, what kind of knowledge academics are putting out in the world. And I think that applies to all educators, right? Like what you do in your classroom is a political choice. It is a series of political choices, and you can censor yourself and hope that the villains will not notice you, and you'll live to teach another semester. But that has a long-term kind of consequence. So in this sense, I'm unsure whether the question of in terms of like somebody's grading a paper and doesn't like a footnote, and there's a lot of narrow and backward-thinking professors out there. Like we don't all teach in the same enlightened department. I'm looking at my colleagues here. We don't all have the same opportunities to have the same colleagues that are asking the same critical questions. But so that is a huge problem, and we do encounter that. I mean, I get students who come into my office who are like, my history professor refuses to accept this as a legitimate question. What do I do about that? Well, I will advise your thesis, that take it to the right person. And so there are those kinds of questions. But what we do in the classroom, I think all of us, I'm getting the gist that there are a lot of educators in the room, and welcome, and we appreciate this spanning conversation. But what we do in the classroom is the work of being the public intellectual, and particularly as publishing academically, assigning things academically, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary school, or college, has long-term consequences. So there's the short game of try to hide, but there's the long game in terms of what passes for knowledge. And African American studies, ethnic studies, gender and women's studies are the places that are the most vulnerable in the university, in part because they were the last to enter the university. They entered the university through social movements, through struggle. The reason why we have a Black Studies department, we have a Gender and Women's Studies department, is because of the Black freedom struggle, because of the women's movement, because of the Chicano student uprisings in Los Angeles and Texas and elsewhere. And so those are the places that the university is perceived to be vulnerable. You read Project 2025, what Viktor Orban did in Hungary is what they intend to do to us here, and the way they came into the European university system was through women's studies. And so, you can try and hide, but the long game matters. What constitutes knowledge? What is true about, I don't know, the Civil War matters. What's that?
It didn't happen.
Well, or it somehow magically was not about slavery. It was just this thing, states' rights. Now, the states' rights to do what, we're not going to discuss. But yeah, I apologize for intervening here. But Thank you, Ms. Muse.
Thank you.
Much
Okay.
obliged. I think we actually, this is, I don't,
Yes.
I
I was just going to thank the panelists and turn it over to you. So thank you, panelists.
Yes, quickly, and thank you all for being here. Like, it's really deeply reassuring to see all of you here in this beautiful space at this fraught moment for all of us. Now, we're gonna do something very odd and super fun, okay? Miss Muse here has a collection of books that she's going to raffle off to members of the audience. And this is a kind of very outstanding collection of sort of classic children. And, well, Eno's book's on that list too, so Eno's book's gonna get raffled off as well. I'm not entirely clear how this is going to happen, but it is. So if you have your ticket, pull it out and win a free banned children's book.
Well,
Oh, well, if you don't, give me a minute. I'll-
Hang on, we'll go like who does like
Okay.
we will get more people.
so not all the books are banned.
Oh, okay.
Actually, only one is. But I'd like to say that this,
Turn your mic on.
at one, I turned it. Boy, I'm technically deficient.
You're doing great, Miss Muse.
At one point, I had a collection of 22,000 books. And these are books that I collected from 1967 to the present. And some of them were children's books. I have rare first editions of Virginia Hamilton's books, of books dating back to the 40s. And I used to give books at Halloween instead of candy, because I despised the idea of giving candy. I just did. And my daughter thought I was nuts. And she said, Mom, nobody's going to want that. Well, I did it for 22 years, and I was living in East Oakland at the time, and the children ate it up, and their parents ate it up. And their parents grew up, and then they wanted their books. So I got books to review. I bought books out of secondhand stores. Authors like Gwendolyn Brooks. Some of these children in East Oakland have signed editions of Gwendolyn Brooks' books, children's books. So I just grabbed a few today to bring, and I thought it would be a great idea to share them with some of you. And so I'll start out with, okay, so.
Barbara's going to pull the ticket.
This is a wonderful way to add to your personal collection. There was a dentist in San Diego who had a room this size almost of books and artifacts. And when he died, the very sad thing is that his children didn't want them, and they went into a dumpster. So I urge you to keep track of what is being shared with you. If you happen to leave this world, make sure that's in your will, that it's going to some place that will be appreciated and preserved.
So, 4740635. Oh, hey! And it's not rigged, Bill.
What are we giving away first? What's
And
our first title?
we are giving a copy of Virginia Hamilton's Dry Long Sew, illustrated by Jerry Pinkney.
All right. We love Jerry Pinkney. He was a favorite. Okay. And next, what title are we giving away next?
Oh, How Many Spots Does a Leopard Have and Other Tales by Julius Lester.
Ah.
4740636. I don't believe this.
This is definitely rigged.
They are a couple. Yeah,
See?
mix that basket up. Somebody's going to think this is rigged, Eileen and Rick.
All right. Congratulations. All right.
Okay, now this one is super duper special. The French called her Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker fought in the resistance in France during the Nazis. And so I definitely wanted to share this book. And there's a little tin that goes, well, it wasn't with the book, but I had this little Josephine Baker tin. So 4740632. Oh, you got Josephine Baker! Oh, darling.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
right.
very welcome.
This is the most fun end to a talk I have ever experienced. All right, all right, here you go.
So, this is a paperback edition. Unfortunately, the dust jacket, the cover, I should say, is soiled, of my book that got banned by Lou Sheldon. And oh, wait, where's the ticket?
Here you are.
So this is a copy of the collection of stories I did called Prejudice. And it includes stories by Ntozake Shange, Julie Blackwoman, Denise Sheridan-Jacobs, Louis Gould, and Sandra Cisnero. And the two stories that really triggered Sheldon the most were by Linda Barry and Lois Gould, because they had the nerve to have, at the time, they were called gay and lesbian characters in them. So 4740638.
All right.
There you go.
All right, we're going to rope Eno into giving away the copy of his own book here. Like, here you go. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to sign it if the person wants it. Well, thanks for providing this. I didn't actually provide this book, but let's see. Uh-oh, can I read this? 4740646. All right.
Hey, all right. All right, congratulations to all of our winners. All right. And we'll just thank you all for being here. With just a brief closing remark from our host.
Well, it's been a most educating, informative event. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? It was amazing. And thank you to the panelists for being here. Thank you to Barbara and all. It's just been wonderful to have you in the house, all of you. Thank you to all of you. And to commercial break time. And to support the institution, I have the Friends Stewards of the African American Museum and Library in the house right here. I have the president, the founders, also here. We want to bring you more programs like this, so consider supporting the Friends Stewards of the African American Museum and Library with membership. I think the membership is quite easy to do. You don't have to be a resident of Oakland. In fact, we have members in Chicago, in Ghana as well. So think about supporting the institution. Join the Friends. You need more information. They're sitting over there. They'll be glad to have a conversation with you. In the meantime, thank you for coming here on Saturday, sharing this wonderful afternoon with us, and I hope you come back. And when you come back, ask to see me. I love to say hello to you. Thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.